You drive 2 hours into the Cascades, to your late wife's favorite place on earth, a cedar-scented cabin her grandfather built with his own hands. And there's a stranger standing in your living room holding bolt, cutters and smiling. That was my Friday. The lock my dad and I installed 10 years ago was sliced clean through, lying in the dirt like something murdered and left behind. The front door hung open, half off its hinges. Inside, my furniture was pushed aside. Photos of my wife, Ellie, face down on the floor. And there she was, Karen Delaney, president of the Pine Ridge HOA, visor perched on her head like a crown, clipboard in hand, cataloging my so-called violations. Your dues were 3 days late, she purred, tapping the paper with her manicured nail. Section 12B permits emergency access. Then 2 guys stepped out of my bedroom wearing tactical vests and sidearms. Karen's tan face drained of color when she realized what she'd just walked into. Freeze that moment. I'll remember it forever, because she didn't know I'd been planning this for months. But before you judge me, let me rewind 6 months so you'll understand how we got here. The cabin, my name's Jack Miller. 52 years old, semi-retired machinist, widower. Ellie died 4 years ago. Cancer, the slow kind that eats everything except the memories. The cabin sits on 40 acres of Douglas fir and creek bottom at 4,200 feet in the Washington Cascades. Her granddad built it in 1968, hand-split cedar beams, mortise and tenon joints. My dad expanded it in 91 and added the workshop where I build custom furniture now. After Ellie passed, that shop became my sanctuary. On weekends, I'd drive up from Tacoma, step out of my old F-250 into that cold mountain air, metal and pine resin mixed together, and I'd almost feel human again. My daughter Jess, 28, a civil engineer with more brains than patience, brings my grandson Leo up once a month. He's 6. Last visit, he caught his first trout with my grandfather's old bamboo rod. And for a second, the way the light hit the water looked like Ellie smiling back at me. This place isn't property. It's family stitched into timber and soil. The HOA queen. Then 18 months ago, Karen Delaney bought the cabin 2 lots over. Fresh from selling shares of some Seattle tech startup. Platinum blonde bob that probably cost more than my truck. A white Lexus RX with the plate "Rules for You." She wore tennis visors indoors like she was allergic to humility. Within 3 months, she'd run for HOA president on a modernization platform. In practice, that meant treating our rustic cabins like condemned shacks, holding back her property values. Her husband, Doug Delaney, ran a construction firm bleeding money. Everyone knew it, but nobody mentioned it. Small-town manners. Karen needed control the way a drowning person needs air. 6 months back, I drove up on a Saturday and found a bright orange citation zip-tied to my door. Unapproved exterior finish. $250 per week until corrected. My hands actually shook reading it. The cabin's never been painted. Natural cedar since Nixon was president. I marched over to Karen's glass-railed deck where a live laugh love sign big enough to violate airspace hung over her patio. She answered the door holding a wine glass the size of a fishbowl. The cedar's the original finish, I told her, staying polite. My wife's Section 8.2 requires approved materials, she interrupted. Cedar weather's unsightly. I'll email you the statute. She never did. I paid the first fine while I researched. Turned out she'd fabricated the rule, but by then she'd moved on. Noise complaints, derelict vehicle warnings over my dad's restored '79 Bronco, and threats to fine me for fire hazard landscaping. That hazard was Ellie's wildflower meadow, lupine, paintbrush and columbine, a living painting that hummed with bees. My buddy Glenn Foster, 61, a fishing guide with a gravel voice, cornered me at the diner. "Jack," he said, "she's run off 3 families this year. All creekfront. Sold cheap." He leaned closer. "Everyone bought by a shell company. Cascade Retreat LLC. Guess who signs the checks? Doug Delaney." Something cold settled in my gut. "She doesn't want compliance," Glenn said. "She wants you gone." That's when I stopped playing defense. The assessment 2 weeks later, I got a certified letter. Inside, notice of an emergency HOA meeting I'd never been invited to. They'd voted to impose a $15,000 infrastructure assessment on all pre-1990 cabins. 4 properties total, including mine. Guess whose nephew got the contract for inspections? Karen's, a rookie engineer who'd previously inspected strip mall foundations in Spokane. The report listed foundation, settling, that's physics, non-GFCI, outlets in a workshop built before those codes even existed, and an inadequate septic system that had passed county inspection 2 months earlier. They gave me 30 days to pay or face a lien. I called Rita Klein, 68, retired courthouse clerk who'd spent 4 decades watching lawyers trip over their own paperwork. She loved finding mistakes the way cats love mice. 2 days later, she called me laughing. Jack, their vote's void. HOA bylaws require 14 days written notice for any special assessment. They gave 6. Illegal. Rita helped me draft a certified letter invoking the cure period and threatening a selective enforcement lawsuit. For a moment, I thought I had leverage. Then Karen escalated. The birthday inspection, she scheduled the follow-up inspection for the exact day of Leo's 6th birthday party. She knew because I'd posted about it on Facebook. My mistake. I wasn't missing my grandson's first real party. Glenn offered to house sit, and I installed trail cameras, motion-activated hidden in tree hollows and eaves. Perfectly legal. Karen showed up anyway, with her brother-in-law, Deputy Colin Reed, in tow. Claimed there'd been an anonymous tip about illegal firearms. I don't even own a gun. Glenn met them at the door, calm. You need a warrant. Camera audio caught the tension. You could hear his pulse in his voice. Karen started taking pictures through the window, but my cameras caught something better. 90 minutes later, her nephew returned alone with a crowbar. He chipped at the foundation mortar, creating the very damage his report claimed existed. The metallic scrape still makes my teeth hurt. I filed a police report. Brought the footage, showed a deputy, not Reed. Thank God, he watched it, shook his head. This is a civil matter. Mr. Miller, civil matter. The man was on video vandalizing my home. 2 days later, Karen posted on the HOA Facebook page. Trespasser threatens compliance officer during lawful inspection. Screenshot of Glenn at my doorway, captioned like I was the criminal. 40+ likes from new transplants. Who didn't know better? That's when I quit trying to be reasonable. The pattern I posted the vandalism footage to a private group of old-timers, 40-odd, cabin owners who'd been here generations. Within 2 hours, 8 replied with their own Karen stories. Carmen Vega said Karen threatened CPS because her kids played near the creek. Old Ed Hansen said she forced him to cut down a 200-year-old oak claiming a utility easement. It was a pattern. Harassment until you sold cheap. A week later, Doug Delaney walked into my machine shop mid-afternoon. Logo polo on, fake-friendly smile. Jack, got a minute? He offered a $180 K cash for my property, 40% under market. Claimed he'd cover the liens. I told him no. His eyes went cold. Hate to see code enforcement start poking around your business permits, he said. That was the moment it turned personal. 7 days later, a county inspector showed up, flagged my fire extinguishers as outdated, despite a bright yellow sticker dated 2 months prior. When I questioned him, he mumbled, "Not our approved vendor." I snapped photos of his ID and badge. "You play poker with Doug Delaney?" I asked. His pen paused mid-checklist. That night, I upgraded everything. Indoor cameras, cloud storage, hidden microphones. Smoke detector cam over the living room. Clock cam facing the back door. Vent hood cam over the kitchen. Redundant systems they could never erase. The mountain air smelled like snow and pine. Usually that smell calmed me. Not that night. The paper trail filed a public records request for properties claiming HOA exemptions in Pine Ridge. 3 weeks later, I had proof. Karen's own cabin had identical violations but was marked exempt, primary residence. Except her real primary residence was listed in Seattle. Tax fraud. HOA boards can't enforce rules they themselves break. That's selective enforcement. Voids their actions and opens them to lawsuits. I made 3 copies of everything. 1 for Rita, 1 in my shop safe, 1 in a Tacoma safety deposit box. Then I checked property records for the 11 cabins that had sold under distress in 3 years. Every single one bought by Cascade Retreat Holdings, LLC. Guess who owned it? Doug Delaney. They weren't just harassing people. They were running a shakedown scheme. The legal trigger 31 days after the bogus assessment. Karen filed the lien, $15,000 plus administrative fees. Rita read it at her kitchen table. Glasses low on her nose, smiling that predator cat smile. Motion to nullify, she said. Illegal meeting, fraudulent assessment. Selective enforcement, she filed with Judge Cho, hearing in 8 weeks. But I wasn't waiting. I requested the HOA's nonprofit tax filings. Public record. When they arrived, the numbers punched me in the gut. Previous president's salary, $8,000. Karen Delaney's $64,000 and $40,000 missing entirely. Rita highlighted it neon yellow. Financial fraud voids any lien, and it's criminal. We sent copies to a few trusted neighbors. Within hours, 12 families stopped paying dues. Karen posted a meltdown essay accusing us of conspiracy. Her lawyer, Vince Parson, fired off cease and desist letters citing laws that didn't even apply. 2 days later, I got a call from Aisha Mangi, reporter for the Cascade Weekly. Mr. Miller, I'm investigating HOA corruption. Mind if we talk? I said sure. I had evidence enough to wallpaper a house, and that's when everything exploded. The counterattack. When Aisha Mangi from Cascade Weekly called, I figured it'd be one short interview. Maybe a quick local piece about a cranky HOA. I didn't realize she'd be the spark that burned down an empire. She had that kind of voice. Sharp, confident, like she already knew the truth and just wanted you to confirm it. Mr. Miller, she said, I've seen your posts. The lien, the vandalism footage, it's not normal. Do you have documentation? I laughed. Enough to make a tree cry. I emailed her everything. The fake inspection, the tax filings, even the photos of Karen's exempt property. She didn't respond for 2 days. Then I heard back one line. This goes deeper than you think, Carmen's breaking point. While Aisha dug through county filings, Karen doubled down. She must have sensed someone coming for her. Her first target. Carmen Vega, a single mom who lived 3 cabins down with her 2 kids. Karen cited her for an unpermitted deck extension. You know what the deck was? 4 pieces of pressure-treated wood on cinder blocks where her kids parked their bikes. Then Karen filed a report with CPS, claimed unsafe living conditions because of bikes. On the lawn, Carmen showed up at my shop the next morning crying so hard she could barely breathe. Mascara streaked her cheeks, hands trembling. She said my kids could be taken away, she sobbed, because their bikes were outside. I'd seen a lot in my life, layoffs, funerals, disease, but watching a mother shake in fear because of a power-drunk neighbor? That was new, Ellie once told me, back when we were still young and scrappy. You can't always defend forever. Jack, sometimes you've got to swing back. I realized then I'd been defending for 6 months. It was time to attack. The war room that night I called Rita. It's time, I said. Within 48 hours, my workshop turned into a command center. Rita sat at the end of the table, glasses perched low, sipping black coffee. Glenn brought donuts in sarcasm. Carmen showed up with a folder full of HOA letters. My daughter Jess came too, laptop open, already dissecting the fake engineering reports. Even Sheriff Roy Blandon showed up, off-duty, jeans and a flannel. He'd been bringing his department's broken tools to my shop for years. So we had a quiet mutual respect. I told them everything, every citation, every threat, every lie. When I finished, Roy stirred his coffee even though there was nothing in it. You said you have cameras. Inside and out. Cloud storage, he nodded slowly. If she enters without a warrant or your permission, that's criminal trespass. Burglary if she takes or damages anything. Then he smiled, not the friendly kind. The kind that says someone's finally gonna get what's coming. Keep me posted, he said. If she makes a move, I want to be there. The discovery 3 days later, Rita's intern, a kid named Deshaun Pierce, hit gold. 26 years old, third-year law student, caffeine addict. He treated courthouse archives like buried treasure. He called Rita at 9 a.m., practically vibrating through the phone. Tell Jack to sit down. Rita put me on speaker. Deshaun pulled the original 1998 Pine Ridge HOA charter from microfiche, she said. There's a paragraph, section 3.7, that permanently exempt structures built before the HOA existed from assessments and modifications. Pause. Except, she continued, in the version filed in 2019. That paragraph's gone. Gone, deleted, they literally used whiteout, Deshawn said, half laughing, half in awe. Scanned it. Refiled it as the real document. Document forgery, a felony in Washington. That's when the tide turned. This doesn't just void your lien, Rita said, tapping the papers. It voids every lien filed against pre-1990 cabins since Karen took over. It's not civil anymore, Jack, it's criminal. The plan we gathered again that weekend. Same group, same table, same coffee. But this time there was an energy in the room. We divided it into fronts. Legal front, Rita and Deshawn. They'd file an emergency motion adding charges of fraud and forgery, subpoena Cascade Retreat's bank records, and copy the Attorney General's office to trigger a state investigation. Engineering front, Jess. She'd dismantle the fake inspection reports line by line. These load calculations are nonsense, she said. They inflated repair costs by 300%. This firm isn't even licensed in Washington. Her plan, publish a verified, peer-reviewed report proving every cabin was structurally sound. Media front, Aisha. She'd interview 5 families and time her exposé for 3 days before our court hearing. Photos of forged documents, tearful testimonies, maximum pressure. Tactical front, Sheriff Roy. His idea was pure brilliance. You said she stalks social media, right? I nodded. So post that you're leaving town, public, obvious. We'll stage units nearby. If she breaks in again, we'll be ready. It wasn't entrapment. It was documentation and payback. The insurance play Jess added another angle. The financial kill shot. HOAs carry errors and omissions insurance, she explained. It covers honest mistakes, not crimes. If we prove fraud, the insurance company will drop them and go after Karen personally. She drafted a detailed letter summarizing the allegations and mailed it straight to the carrier. Insurance. Companies hate fraud more than anyone. Within 48 hours, they opened an internal investigation, separate from ours. Now Karen would be under fire from every direction. The bait on Facebook, I posted a picture of my truck loaded with camping gear. Caption, heading to Portland for Leo's soccer tournament this weekend. Go Wildcats. Made it public? Tagged the hotel. Full bait. Then Glenn parked his RV deep in my property's tree line, 200 yards out, camera ready. Let's see if your favorite neighbor takes the bait, he texted. Meanwhile, Aisha's story was brewing. She'd reached out to the Attorney General's press office for comment. And that's how word leaked. Karen panicked. The meltdown she called an emergency HOA meeting that Tuesday. Carmen went, phone recording everything. Karen stood at the podium in the Pine Ridge Community Hall, hands shaking. Certain members, she said, are spreading false information about HOA finances. The supposed missing funds were a software accounting error, the room murmured. Nobody believed her. She sent frantic private messages to her board. Jack Miller is suing all of us personally. You could lose your homes if you don't stand with me. Fear works fast. Within 24 hours, her lawyer sent me a cease and desist threatening a $50,000 defamation suit. I didn't respond. I wanted her to think I was scared. Meanwhile, Deshawn filed an ethics complaint against that same lawyer for abuse of process. Jess's letter reached the insurance company. And Roy was quietly preparing his training exercise. The first crack, the night before my supposed Portland trip, my internet line got cut. Clean diagonal slice, pro-level job. They thought they'd killed my cameras. They didn't know everything recorded to backup SD cards, synced to the cloud. At 2 a.m., Glenn spotted a diesel truck creeping up my driveway with its lights off. Doug Delaney. Glenn called Roy immediately. A deputy, not Colin Reed, arrived within minutes and caught Doug near my fence, bolt cutters in hand. Claimed he was checking on a friend's property. Roy logged it as ongoing investigation. Another nail in the coffin. The next morning, Roy called me. Jack, they're spooked. You sure you still want to do this? I looked at Ellie's photo on my workbench. Yeah, let's finish it. The setup Friday morning, 10 a.m., I posted another update. Heading out now. Portland bound, 3-day trip. Wish Leo luck. That same afternoon, Glenn stopped by the diner in town. Doug Delaney happened to be there. Doug slid into Glenn's booth, oily smile plastered on. Heard Jack's out of town for a few days. Yeah, Glenn said between bites. Big tournament. Doug placed an envelope on the table. $5,000. Maybe you forget about that video from last time, yeah? Glenn looked at the envelope, then at him. 5? That's insulting. He pulled out his phone and hit record. How about 20? Doug froze. You recording this? Glenn grinned. Washington's a two-party consent state. But this diner's public. Totally legal. Doug's face drained of color. He grabbed the envelope and bolted, nearly knocking over a waitress. Glenn forwarded the audio to Roy within minutes. Attempted witness tampering. Another felony for the pile. The trap was ready. Showtime at 2:47 p.m. My driveway camera caught Karen's Lexus rolling up. Deputy Reed's patrol car right behind. Glenn texted me one word. Showtime. I sat in his living room in town, watching the camera feeds live. 52. Karen pulled bolt cutters from her trunk and sliced through my lock. Reed hesitated, said something off camera. Karen's voice was crystal clear. Section 12.4 covers emergency entry. Reed. If you say so. They stepped inside. Karen started snapping photos, rifling through my drawers, moving furniture. It wasn't an inspection, it was a search. Reed kept saying, "We should go," but she ignored him. Glenn texted Roy, "She's inside." 3 minutes later, the sound of engines rumbled through the valley. 3 black Suburbans and a sheriff's Bearcat armored unit rolled up my road like thunder. Karen looked out my window and froze. This is the sheriff's office. The loudspeaker boomed, "Exit the property with your hands visible." Reed turned white. "Karen, did you actually get a warrant?" "We don't need a warrant," she shouted, waving her clipboard like a shield. "Yeah," he said, backing away. "That's not how laws work." The SWAT team breached the already broken door. Weapons drawn. Standard protocol when a deputy's involved. Karen screamed, "I'm the victim. I'm HOA president." Roy stepped in 30 seconds later, reviewed the camera footage right on scene, and arrested her for burglary, criminal trespass, and destruction of property. Reed was separated for questioning. Then Roy called me. "Jack," he said, "you can come home now." The reckoning 72 hours after the arrest. Pine Ridge looked like a town that had just woken up from a bad dream. You couldn't find a single parking spot near the community center that night. 90 residents packed into a hall that usually hosted 12 people, and a coffee urn that hadn't been washed since the Clinton administration. Word had spread fast. Cascade Weekly hit the stands that morning with a front-page headline, HOA president arrested in break-in. Fraud allegations surface. Karen Delaney's mugshot stared out under fluorescent lights. Handcuffed, her once perfect visor hair pulled back into a frazzled knot. 2 Seattle news crews were parked outside, lights blazing against the cold mountain evening. Reporters hovered near the doors like vultures waiting for the first tear to fall. Inside, the air was thick, burnt coffee, nervous sweat, and the electric crackle of long-suppressed anger. The meeting Karen sat at the front table, hands trembling as she shuffled papers. No visor today, no tennis whites. Just a wrinkled blouse and the look of someone who'd been up for 3 nights straight. Her husband, Doug, sat 2 seats away, jaw locked. Eyes dead. Karen cleared her throat and began reading from a statement. Her lawyer, Vince Parson, had clearly written it. Recent misunderstandings have been weaponized by a small group of disgruntled members. I have always acted in good faith, within my authority as HOA president. The arrest was a misunderstanding. The truth will come out. Her voice cracked on the last sentence. Someone in the back shouted, "What about the forged documents, Karen?" She froze, looked up. Her eyes darted to Vince. He gave the smallest shake of his head. "Lawyer reflex. I don't know what you're referring to," she said. That's when I stood up. The evidence Rita nodded from the front row and handed me a thick stack of packets. I started passing them down the rows. "Every person here should see this," I said. Inside each packet, side-by-side copies of the original 1998 HOA charter and the altered 2019 version. The paragraph exempting pre-1990 cabins, erased. the faint texture of whiteout visible if you tilted the page just right. The room went dead silent, except for the sound of papers rustling. "This isn't about me," I said, voice steady. "It's about every family who lost their home because someone decided the rules didn't apply to them." I turned on the projector. The next slide hit like a thunderclap. The LLC registration for Cascade Retreat Holdings, showing Doug Delaney as managing member. Gasps rippled through the crowd. 11 families, I continued, lost their cabins in 5 years. Every single one bought by the same company. Hers. Carmen stood up beside me, holding her phone. "She called CPS on my kids because they left bikes on the lawn," she said, voice trembling but loud. "You know what that's like? Having strangers come into your home and ask if you hurt your children because of bikes." Her voice cracked, but she kept going. "My daughter still cries when she hears a knock at the door." The flood-old Ed Hansen rose next, phone in hand, holding up a photo of a massive tree stump. "She made me cut down a 200-year-old oak," he said. "Told me there was a utility easement." Total lie. He projected the photo on the wall. The stump surrounded by sawdust, roots spread like bones. People started shouting now. Not angry, furious. Then Glenn walked up to the front, connected his phone to the sound system, and hit play. Doug's voice filled the hall. $5,000. "Maybe you forget what you saw." Then Glenn's calm reply, "How about 20? I'm not a cheap date." The crowd erupted, a mix of outrage and dark laughter. You could feel the shift in the air. Fear was gone. Even the board members, the ones who'd backed Karen out of fear, looked like they'd seen a ghost. The collapsed Jess stood next. "I reviewed the engineering report used to justify the assessments," she said, holding up a binder. "The calculations were inflated by 300%. The firm isn't even licensed in Washington. They created fake data to justify fines and liens." She handed copies to the board. "Here's the corrected version, stamped by a licensed civil engineer." And then Sheriff Roy, standing quietly in the back, finally stepped forward, his badge glinting in the harsh fluorescent light. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. His presence was enough. Beside him, a woman in a navy blazer raised her hand. "I'm Investigator Chen, Washington State Attorney General's office. We've opened a criminal inquiry into HOA financial practices and document tampering. If you've been affected, please see me after this meeting." The room went still, then buzzed with murmurs. 20 people immediately lined up near her. The final question, Aisha from Cascade Weekly stepped forward. Microphone in hand, camera crew rolling. "Mrs. Delaney," she asked, "did you alter HOA covenants to justify liens against properties your husband's company later purchased below market value?" Karen opened her mouth. Nothing came out. She looked at her lawyer. Vince sighed, stood up, and said, "I'm withdrawing as counsel effective immediately." The crowd gasped. That's when Karen cracked. "You don't understand," she shouted. Doug's business was collapsing. We were going to lose everything. I was trying to save us. The confession echoed through the hall, and every news camera caught it. You could hear a pin drop, the vote someone shouted. "Vote her out." The motion came from the floor, seconded immediately. Remove Karen Delaney as president. Unanimous. Void all assessments and liens since 2019. Unanimous. Hire independent auditors. Unanimous. When the last motion passed, the room exploded in applause. Not just clapping, but relief. Karen gathered her papers, face pale, and walked through the silent crowd toward the exit. As she passed my chair, I said quietly, "You could have just followed the rules." Karen, she didn't look at me, just kept walking, past the cameras, into the parking lot, into whatever hell was waiting next. The fallout 3 months later, the dominoes had all fallen. Karen pled guilty to felony burglary and misdemeanor fraud. 18-month suspended sentence, 5 years probation, $47,000 in restitution to affected families, 200 hours of community service. Doug pled to conspiracy and bribery, $80,000 fine. Their Seattle house went up for sale within a week. Cascade Retreat Holdings was dissolved by court order. The 11 stolen properties were auctioned, proceeds used to compensate the families they'd defrauded. Deputy Colin Reed took early retirement, facing an internal investigation. Pension reduced, badge gone. The HOA's insurance company, the same one Jess had contacted, dropped coverage after paying out $340,000 in settlements. Every affected homeowner's fees and damages covered. The new board elected Carmen as president. Old Ed took treasurer. Jess volunteered as compliance officer. First order of business: issue a public apology to every displaced family and set up a return fund for anyone who wanted to come back. 3 did. The healing by the following summer. Pine Ridge looked like it used to, humming with chainsaws, laughter, and the smell of cedar smoke instead of tension. Ellie's wildflower garden had exploded that year. Blue lupine, red paintbrush, yellow columbine. Leo and I built a small bench there using my grandfather's old hand plane. Same one that's been in our family for 3 generations. When Leo ran his fingers along the wood grain, I swear I felt Ellie smiling, not from memory this time, but from the place itself. We used part of my settlement to start the Pine Ridge Heritage Fund, grants for low-income families to preserve historic cabins built before 1970. The first grant went to Old Ed to repair his foundation, the second to a young couple restoring their great-grandparents' homestead. That fall, we held the first ever Pine Ridge Heritage Festival. Woodworking demos, cabin tours, storytelling, kids chasing fireflies as the sun dipped behind the ridge. Sheriff Roy showed up off duty, brought his grandson and taught him how to fish in the creek. Carmen joked, "I think we just invented something better than HOA meetings." Epilogue, as the last light faded over the mountains. I stood on my cabin porch, the air thick with pine and the faint sweetness of Ellie's flowers. My phone buzzed. Text from Rita. "County just flagged another HOA president for fraud. You in?" I smiled. Texted back one word, always. Because the fight for home never really ends. But neither do we. So if you've ever dealt with an HOA nightmare, drop your story in the comments. And if this helped you sleep a little easier tonight, hit that subscribe button. We're just getting started. The trial begins. The night after Karen's arrest, Pine Ridge didn't sleep. People left porch lights on, curtains half open, whispering that maybe, finally, the storm was ending. But for me, it was only halftime. Roy called around 11 p.m. "Jack, she's already lawyered up. Her husband's posting bail tomorrow. You ready for what comes next?" I looked out my window at the pine silhouettes against a bruised moon. "Yeah," I said. "Been ready for months." Court summons 3 weeks later, an ivory envelope arrived. State of Washington versus Karen Delaney. Charges: burglary, forgery, fraud, criminal trespass, destruction of property. Doug had his own sheet. Conspiracy, bribery, attempted witness tampering. The courthouse was 2 counties south, brick and glass, smelling like old coffee and wet paper. Rita met me at the entrance, legal pad in hand, glasses already fogged. "Don't react," she whispered. "Just observe. Let the facts do the talking." Inside, the gallery was packed. Reporters, homeowners, even strangers who'd read Aisha's article. Karen sat at the defense table in a navy suit 2 sizes too tight, face powdered into a mask. Doug beside her, jaw grinding. When the bailiff called, "State versus Delaney," the hum in the room dropped to 0. Opening shots. The prosecutor, a calm, razor-eyed woman named Dana Holt, started simple. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about power, about a president who decided the rules didn't apply to her." Every sentence landed like a hammer. Vince Parson, now Karen's second-choice attorney, tried to counter. "My client acted within the bylaws. Any paperwork irregularities were clerical." Rita leaned toward me and muttered, "Clerical my foot." Then Dana projected the 2 charters, the original 1998 and Karen's 2019 copy, side by side on the screen. Even the jurors leaned forward. The whiteout shimmered under fluorescent light like guilt itself. Deshawn on the stand. When Deshawn took the stand, he looked nervous for all of 5 seconds. Then he came alive. He walked the jury through microfiche scanning, document archiving, everything. Then he pointed to the erased clause. "This isn't a copy error. Someone physically altered the text and refilled it as official record." Vince objected. "Speculation." Judge Cho overruled without looking up. "Facts are clear, counselor," Deshawn smiled. "That's the thing about whiteout, ma'am. It leaves a texture. Truth always does. The jury actually chuckled. Carmen speaks, Carmen followed. She described the CPS call, the fear, the knock on her door. She made me feel like a criminal for letting my kids play outside. Half the courtroom shifted uncomfortably. Karen avoided eye contact the entire time, staring at her folded hands like they might turn into wings and fly her out of there. Doug's turn. When Doug finally took the stand, his lawyer's voice trembled. Doug claimed ignorance, said he didn't know about the liens or the crowbar incident. Dana dropped a photo on the evidence screen. Doug, bolt cutters in hand, caught by Glenn's camera at 2 a.m. The courtroom gasped. Doug's mouth opened, then closed. "Looks like you knew enough to bring tools," Dana said. He slumped back, color draining from his face. Rita's moment. Then Rita stepped up. Calm, precise, deadly. She testified how the illegal meetings violated the HOA's own bylaws, how selective enforcement nullified every lien. HOA boards, she told the jury, are meant to protect communities, not harvest them. Dana handed her the fraudulent tax return. Rita adjusted her glasses, smiled that small cat smile. $64,000 labeled as management fees. Yet the HOA budget lists no corresponding expenditures. "When you move numbers, you leave footprints," she tapped the page. "And I followed them right to Mrs. Delaney." Karen's lawyer objected again. Overruled. Again. The defense crumbles. By day 3, Karen's defense was in tatters. Vince tried to blame the previous treasurer, who immediately stood in court and shouted, "That's a lie." Roy testified last. He described receiving Glenn's call, the SWAT arrival, the body cam footage. Then the courtroom watched it on a 70-inch screen. Karen cutting my lock, stepping inside, declaring Section 12.4 permits this. When the video ended, nobody breathed for 5 seconds. Dana turned to the jury. "No statute authorizes burglary with a clipboard." Verdict: the jury deliberated less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Karen closed her eyes, shoulders shaking once. No tears, just the quiet collapse of someone realizing the empire's gone. Doug looked straight ahead, like a man watching his house burn down and knowing the insurance won't cover it. Judge Cho sentenced them the next week. Karen Delaney, 18 months suspended, 5 years probation, $47,000 restitution, 200 hours community service. Doug Delaney, $80,000 fine, 1 year home confinement, banned from contracting in Washington. Rita whispered. Justice delivered. Interest accrued. Aftermath outside the courthouse, cameras flashed like lightning. Reporters shouted, "Mr. Miller, how does it feel?" I looked at them, then back at the building. Feels like the mountain can finally breathe again. The next morning, Cascade Weekly ran a headline, HOA Tyrants Fall, Pine Ridge Wins. But for Pine Ridge, the real work was just beginning. The fallout and the rebuild. The courthouse echo stayed with me for days, that quiet hum right after the verdict. When the gavel drops and the noise of a year's worth of tension finally exhales, you'd think that would feel like victory. But standing outside that building, I didn't feel like I'd won anything. Just balance restored. Karen's fall Karen. Delaney spent her first week of probation cleaning public parks along Highway 12, an orange vest over. The same manicured hands that used to wave HOA citations at people like Holy Writ folks. Slowed their cars just to see if it was really her. It was. News crews eventually left her alone. The scandal had burned out. But Pine Ridge didn't forget. She sold her Lexus, then her cabin, then quietly moved to Spokane to live with her sister. Aisha Mangi ran a follow-up piece called The Price of Power. It showed Karen raking pine needles with a blank stare. Her quote was 2 words long. I regret. Doug's silence. Doug didn't talk to anyone after sentencing. His company folded in weeks. He spent his home confinement in a gated house outside Seattle. Ankle monitor blinking like a warning light every time he got too close to the door. Rumor was, he tried to pitch a reality show about redeeming your reputation. No network called back. Sometimes justice isn't a hammer. Sometimes it's a silence that follows you everywhere you go. Pine Ridge rebuilds. When I drove up to the cabin again that spring, snowmelt had turned the creek into silver lightning. The old mailbox still leaned sideways. I never fixed it. Ellie liked it that way. Glenn was already there, pressure washing the community center walls. Figured we could make this place look less like a crime scene, he said, grinning. Carmen brought coffee and a toolbox. Old Ed showed up with new LED lights for the porch. Jess arrived with Leo and a clipboard of her own. The good kind, the rebuilding kind. We didn't hold meetings anymore. We held work days. Nails, wood, laughter. That was the new HOA, Carmen said. No more presidents, just neighbors. Nobody disagreed Rita's paperwork. War meanwhile, Rita turned Pine Ridge's victory into a playbook. She and Deshawn created a digital file called the Cabin Defense Manual. Templates for filing injunctions, sample letters for record requests, and a step-by-step guide to catching crooked HOA boards in their own rules. They published it online for free. Within weeks, downloads crossed 5,000. Rita's smile when I told her that? Pure sunshine. Guess retirement's overrated, she said. Aisha's interview 2 months after the trial, Aisha came back for one last story. We sat on my porch, coffee steaming, mountains glowing orange in the sunset. She asked, "What made you keep fighting when everyone else sold?" I looked toward Ellie's wildflower garden, now alive with bees. "Because this place isn't real estate," I said. "It's memory, and you can't put a lien on that." She nodded, clicked off the recorder, and said softly, "That's your closing line right there." Community revival by summer. Pine Ridge looked alive again. The cabins that once had "for sale" signs now had smoke coming from their chimneys. Kids rode bikes past my driveway, and Carmen's little ones raced Leo to the creek almost every afternoon. We organized the first Pine Ridge Heritage Festival that June. Barbecue, old photos, music echoing off the ridges. Glenn manned the grill, pretending he was the mayor. Jess set up an exhibit showing engineering diagrams of original 1960s timber framing. Old Ed told stories so exaggerated even he laughed halfway through. Sheriff Roy showed up with his grandson. Let the boy fish in the same creek where Ellie once taught me patience. There was no tension, no legal talk, no fear. Just wood smoke, laughter, and peace that felt earned. Karen's letter. Then in late August I got a letter. No return address, just a postmark from Spokane. Inside was a single page. "Jack, you were right. I didn't see people, I saw property values. I thought control would fix my life. Didn't. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed to say I understand now. Take care of that place. It's more alive than I ever was." Karen and I sat there for a while, staring at her handwriting. Perfect cursive, controlled even in apology. Then I folded the letter, put it in the drawer with Ellie's journals. Some ghosts don't need to haunt you. They just need acknowledgement. The grant fund, we use the settlement money, mine, Carmen's, and Old Ed's, to start something permanent. The Pine Ridge Heritage Fund, a non-profit for preserving pre-1970 cabins, open to anyone in the Cascades. The Heritage Fund expands by midsummer. The Pine Ridge Heritage Fund had chapters in 4 states. Families in Oregon, Idaho, and Montana began using our templates to challenge unfair HOA fines. Jess handled logistics like a general, Zoom calls, legal templates, volunteer training. Rita joked, "She's got more bite than both of us." Combined, Deshawn started a podcast called Paper Trails. It went viral, ordinary people sharing extraordinary. Battles for their homes. Aisha's documentary hit 2 million views within a month. Sponsors began donating to help more families. The little war we started had become a movement. Ellie's garden that fall. I built a new bench beside Ellie's garden. Leo helped me carve her name into the wood. Ellie Miller, she planted courage. When we finished, he said, "Grandpa, do you think Grandma knows what you did?" I looked up at the sky, blue fading into gold. "Yeah," I said. She always knew. The wind moved through the flowers like a whisper. Letters from everywhere, every week the mail pile grew. Letters from people we'd never met. "You saved our home. We didn't give up because of your story. Thank you for proving good. Neighbors still exist." Glenn taped them on the community hall wall until it looked like a collage of hope. Carmen called it the Wall of Winds. Every time someone new wrote, we added another pin. Leo's speech at the next festival. Leo, now 16, asked to speak. He stood on stage, voice shaking but clear. "My grandpa taught me that a house isn't wood or nails. It's the people who refuse to let it fall. So this year we're donating part of the festival's money to rebuild homes for veterans. The crowd cheered. Arthur saluted him from the front row, tears in his eyes. That was the moment I knew Pine Ridge would outlive all of us. A night of light, as dusk fell. Fairy lights blinked on across the trees. Music echoed through the valley, fiddles, laughter. The rhythmic thud of dancing feet on old wood. I stood at the edge of the crowd, camera in hand, watching the faces of people who once hid behind curtains now laughing under the stars. Carmen nudged me. "You're quiet tonight." "Just taking inventory," I said. "Of miracles," she smiled. "You still think you're done fighting?" "Never," I said. "But maybe now I'm fighting for the right reasons." The legacy of Pine Ridge. When the last song faded and the fire crackled low, Rita handed me a folder. Inside were plans for something bigger, the National Home Integrity Project. Federal grants, she said. Partnerships. "Real change, you in?" I laughed. "You already know the answer," she smiled. "Then let's make this official." One last story. The year after the second Heritage Festival, the mountains looked younger. Fresh roofs gleamed in the morning sun, laughter rolled through the valley. And for the first time in a decade, Pine Ridge was on every map for the right reason. The National Home Integrity Project, Rita's idea, turned into something no one saw coming. Within 6 months, the National Home Integrity Project, or NHIP, was born. Headquarters, my old workshop, same sawdust smell, new purpose. Deshawn ran research, Jess handled logistics, Carmen led community training. Rita became director by default. She was the only one who could boss us all around and make us thank her for it. We built an online network that linked thousands of homeowners across the country. They shared stories, legal documents, even drone footage of corrupt inspections. Within weeks, we had 3 new cases in Texas, Colorado, and Arizona, each eerily similar to ours. The fight had gone national. Washington, D.C. call one morning in October. I got a call from a blocked number. "Mr. Miller," a voice said, "this is Congressman Lewis Hampton's office. He's proposing a homeowner rights bill. He'd like you to testify." I stared at the phone for a long moment, coffee forgotten. When I told Rita, she smirked. "Guess you're trading sawdust for microphones." The Capitol hearing room smelled like paper and politics. Rows of reporters, flashing cameras, people in suits pretending not to be nervous. When they called my name, I stood, adjusted the same flannel I'd worn in every interview since Aisha's first story. "Mr. Miller," the chairwoman said, "you led the movement that exposed HOA fraud in your state. What should Congress learn from you?" I looked straight into the cameras. "That home isn't a luxury, it's a promise. Place where people raise families, not paperwork. We can't let contracts choke the roots that hold our communities together." Silence. Then quiet applause. Even the staffers clapped. After the cameras outside, Aisha waited with her crew. "Full circle," she said, smiling. "Not yet," I told her. "Circle's still growing," she laughed. Then I guess my next documentary just found its title. Karen's End a few months later. A small envelope arrived from Spokane. Inside was a folded clipping. "Local woman volunteers at homeless shelter expands housing program." Below the headline, a picture. Karen Delaney, hair gray, sleeves rolled up, serving soup. No note. Unneeded. Some stories don't end. They just quiet down. The mountain's voice winter came again, soft and slow. Snow layered the cabin roof. Smoke rose from every chimney. And Leo came home from college for the first time. He walked into the workshop, saw the old hammer hanging on the wall. "You still keep that thing?" he asked, smiling. I nodded. "It built this place. And it built me." He ran a hand over the handle. "Think you'll ever stop building?" "Not while someone still needs a home," I said. The letter A week later. An official envelope arrived. Washington State Governor's seal. Inside, in recognition of his service to community integrity and homeowner advocacy, the state of Washington hereby names October 12th Jack Miller Day. I laughed out loud. Glenn insisted on printing shirts that said, "Jack Miller for President." Rita threatened to sue him for trademark violation. Pine Ridge had found its humor again. The Legacy Night at the next Heritage Festival. Crowds stretched all the way to the highway. Music, banners, the smell of barbecue and cedar smoke. As the sun set, Leo stepped on stage and called me forward. This community stands here because one man refused to sell his home, and because everyone else decided to stand with him. I froze, throat tight. Behind him, a new banner unfurled. The Jack Miller Center for Community Integrity. Everyone cheered. For a second, I couldn't breathe. Then I did the only thing I could, looked up at Ellie's garden, glowing in the firelight, and whispered, "We did it." The epilogue. Now when I sit on the porch at dawn, the valley hums with life. 1,000 stories born from one stubborn fight. Sometimes I get letters from strangers saying, "You gave us courage." But the truth is, they gave it back to me, because courage isn't loud. It's steady. It's a hand on an old hammer, fixing what's broken again and again. If you're watching this, if someone's trying to take your peace, remember this. You don't fight alone. You fight with every person who ever refused to back down. So keep building, keep believing, and when your own storm finally clears, leave a light on for the next one coming home. First grant, rebuild Ed's old porch. Second, help a young couple in Leavenworth restore their grandparents' A-frame. Third, legal support for a family in Oregon fighting their own HOA. Jess handled the paperwork. Glenn ran the website. Rita oversaw compliance, naturally. Within a year, local news called it the most wholesome revenge in Washington state. Leo's promise one evening. Leo and I worked in the workshop together, sanding a small stool he'd designed himself. His hands moved like mine used to when I was his age. He said, "Grandpa, why do you keep that old hammer?" "It's all rusty," I smiled. "Because my dad used it, and his dad before him. It reminds me that fixing things takes more than strength. It takes memory." He nodded like he understood. Maybe he did. He doesn't know it yet, but one day that hammer's his. A quiet visit in October. I stopped by the community center after dark. It was quiet, except for the hum of the vending machine and the smell of pine cleaner. On the bulletin board, someone had pinned a photo, black and white, from the trial. Karen in the witness box, eyes down, light hitting her face just right. Below it, someone had written, "Never forget what we learned." I took it down, folded it, and tucked it behind the community charter. The original one, restored and framed behind glass. Some lessons belong to history. Winter again. Snow came early that year. The first morning it blanketed the cabin. I walked out with my coffee, boots sinking into the cold powder. The air smelled clean again, like the mountain itself had forgiven us. Ellie's garden was buried beneath white silence, but I knew the flowers were sleeping, not gone. Peace doesn't mean nothing happens. It means when things do, you're ready to face them. And for the first time in years, I was. The Heritage Fund and the new threat by spring, Pine Ridge had settled into something that almost felt holy. No lawsuits, no meetings, just hammers, laughter, and the smell of cedar. But peace doesn't last forever. It never does. The Cowlet was a gray Tuesday when Rita called. Her voice had that clipped tone I hadn't heard since the trial. "Jack," she said, "how far are you willing to drive for déjà vu?" I laughed. "Depends. You talking fishing or trouble?" "Trouble. A town called Silver Valley. HOA gone rogue. They just evicted a 74-year-old veteran over a flagpole. I didn't even ask where. I just said, I'll bring the truck. Silver Valley 2 hours east of Pine Ridge, the highway winds through fog and rain. Silver Valley sits between two ridge lines, half mining ghosts, half new money. Where Pine Ridge smelled of wood smoke, Silver Valley reeked of fresh paint and fear. The HOA there was called Silverview Estates, and its president was a man named Travis Coleman, ex-realtor, ex-Marine, current dictator. Tall, polished, expensive boots, the kind of smile that hides paperwork. The first person we met was Arthur Bennett, the veteran Rita mentioned. He lived in a small ranch-style house with a weathered flagpole and a homemade ramp. The flag had flown there since his wife's funeral. Travis fined him $500 a day for unauthorized exterior structures. Arthur's story Arthur met us on his porch, leaning on a cane carved with eagle feathers. His eyes were blue steel. They told me patriotism wasn't aesthetic, he said. I told them I fought for their right to complain about aesthetics. Rita smiled, scribbling notes. Do you have copies of the letters? Every damn one. He handed her a folder thick as a phone book. Inside, fake hearing notices, photos of his ramp labeled eyesore, even a lien threat. Deja Vu didn't cover it. This was the same script. New actors. The fund in action. The Pine Ridge Heritage Fund had grown fast. Donations from homeowners, small grants, even a few viral videos thanks to Aisha's coverage. This was its first real test outside our town. We filed for injunctive relief within 48 hours, citing elder harassment and unlawful lien practices. Rita handled the legal side. Jess and Deshawn dug into records. Glenn and Carmen drove down to help Arthur reinforce his ramp before another inspection. When Travis saw our crew show up, he smirked. "You people again?" "Not people," I said. "Precedent. The pattern Deshawn hit gold again." Silverview Estates used the same accounting software as Pine Ridge once did. Identical templates. Same line items. Hidden in plain sight was a monthly management retainer, wired to a Shell LLC, Coleman Community Services LLC. The signature? Travis Coleman's own. Rita nearly laughed when she saw it. They never learn. Aisha returns. Aisha arrived 2 days later, camera crew in tow. "Jack, every time I think your story's over, you find a sequel." "This isn't a sequel," I said. "It's a pattern." She interviewed Arthur, recorded Travis trying to dodge her questions, then filmed the ramp and flag fluttering in slow motion. Within 24 hours, her teaser hit 300,000 views online. Headline, "The Next Karen, Travis Strikes Back." That night, someone slashed Arthur's truck tires. Then power to his house cut out. Roy called local authorities, but Silver Valley's sheriff was a friend of Travis's. "Neighborhood dispute," he said. I drove back there at dawn. Generator in the bed. Arthur stood in the doorway, blanket around his shoulders. Oxygen tube hissing softly. "You didn't have to come," he said. "I know," I told him. "That's why I did." The hearing 2 weeks later, Rita filed a motion to freeze the HOA's accounts. Travis strutted into the county hearing room in a tailored coat, his lawyer trailing like smoke. The judge, a gray-haired woman named Marjorie Lee, glanced over the paperwork, then looked up. "Mr. Coleman, why does your HOA management company share your home address?" He stumbled. "It's efficient." "Efficient for who?" By the end of the day, the court granted a temporary freeze and demanded full financial disclosure. Travis stormed out, muttering, "You people think you're heroes." Rita smiled. "No, just consistent." The public shift Isha's full story dropped the next week. Footage of Arthur raising the flag. Interviews with veterans across Washington. Clips from the Pine Ridge trial. It spread like wildfire. Justice for Arthur trended for 3 days. Donations to the Heritage Fund tripled. Travis tried a press conference. Someone in the crowd shouted, "How's that LLC doing?" He walked off mid-sentence. Arthur's piece. When the final ruling came, Judge Lee voided every fine, dissolved the HOA board, and ordered restitution to all homeowners. Arthur cried quietly in the hallway. He looked at me and said, "Guess I get to keep my flag after all." I told him, "No one ever takes that from you again." He nodded, saluted, and whispered, "Tell your Ellie she raised a good fighter." I didn't correct him. Maybe he saw something I didn't. The bigger fight later that night, Rita called from her car. "You realize what we just proved? It's statewide. These HOAs copy each other's paperwork like homework. So, what do? She paused. "We make the Heritage Fund national." I looked out at the valley below, lights flickering like constellations on Earth. "Then let's start tomorrow." Ellie's voice that evening. I played an old voicemail of Ellie's, one I hadn't listened to since she passed. "Don't forget to water the garden. And Jack, stop fighting everything. Some things bloom when you just protect them." I smiled, eyes stinging. "Guess I finally figured that out, Ellie," I whispered. "Because sometimes protecting means fighting, and sometimes fighting means planting something that outlives you." When the Silver Valley case closed, the air around Pine Ridge felt different, lighter, braver, as if the mountains themselves had exhaled after holding their breath for too long. Winter was gone. Spring came roaring in with blue skies and muddy boots. For the first time in years, I woke up to birds instead of worry. The festival returns. Carmen had the idea first. "Let's bring back the Heritage Festival," she said, slamming a stack of flyers onto my workbench. "Bigger, louder, better. We survived hell. Let's celebrate it. By June, every cabin in Pine Ridge buzzed with hammers, paintbrushes, and guitar strings. Jess designed a new banner, Pine Ridge, where homes have stories. Glenn turned the community lot into a stage, strung fairy lights between the pines. Kids painted wooden signs that said, "Freedom isn't HOA approved." Rita laughed so hard she nearly dropped her clipboard. Rebuilding Roots people came from all over Washington that weekend. Families who'd followed our story online, veterans, builders, even a few reporters who'd once doubted us. Roy handled traffic with his deputies. Deshaun livestreamed the event, introducing speakers from different towns who'd fought their own HOAs. Arthur Bennett showed up too, wearing his old service jacket and holding the same flagpole Travis tried to take away. When he raised it on the community hall roof, the crowd went silent. Then someone started clapping. Then everyone. That sound rolled through the valley like thunder. Aisha's documentary Aisha brought her full crew this time. Her new film, The Fight for Home, followed our journey from the first lien notice to the National Heritage Fund movement. She asked me for one more interview. We sat under the same pine tree where Ellie once planted wildflowers. She said, "Jack, what do you think this all means?" I thought for a while, then answered, "It means the land remembers who belongs to it, not who tries to own it." When she smiled, I knew that line would end up in her film's trailer. Karen's name fades. People sometimes asked if Karen Delaney ever reached out again. She didn't. Last I heard, she was working at a hardware store in Spokane, blending into the background. But I think of her sometimes, not with hate, but with a quiet kind of pity. Because she could have stood